Norman Rockwell, America's beloved artist, was hiding a bombshell behind his wholesome family portraits, a secret that could have torched his entire career. In 1964, he unleashed a painting so raw it left grown men in tears and mothers scrambling to cover their kids' eyes, exposing an ugly side of America nobody wanted to face. Galleries slammed their doors shut, newspapers refused to touch it, but Rockwell went for it anyway, knowing it might wreck everything he'd built over decades. This daring piece revealed the real Norman Rockwell, a man wrestling with truth, not just painting happy scenes. Born February 3, 1894, at 789 St. Nicholas Avenue in Harlem, New York City, he grew up in a modest home with parents Jarvis and Nancy Rockwell. His dad toiled for a Philadelphia textile firm his whole life, keeping the family afloat but never flush with cash. Norman had an older brother, Jarvis, but they were never tight, sharing a house but not much else. His dad was Presbyterian, his mom Episcopalian, creating a bit of a religious mashup at home. The Rockwell roots stretched back to England, to 1635, when John Rockwell sailed on the Hopewell and helped settle Connecticut. Even as a toddler, Norman stood out. At 3, in 1897, he'd sit spellbound as his dad read Charles Dickens aloud, captivated not just by the tales, but by how Dickens crafted characters with words. His father dabbled in copying book illustrations, and young Norman watched closely, a creative spark igniting. His mom's dad was an artist too, though he scraped by painting landscapes, passing down a flicker of talent. Their cramped home buzzed with stories, sketches, and silent struggles, molding Norman's soul. By 9, in 1903, he felt like an outcast, scrawny, awkward, and out of place at school, distant from his parents too. Drawing became his refuge, a world he could shape and make sense of, spending hours sketching alone, using humor and bold features to deal with how folks treated him. That year, his family ditched the city for Mamaroneck, a quiet Westchester County town that flipped his world. The peaceful streets, wide skies, and fresh faces sparked a love for small-town life. He got hooked on Howard Pyle, a legendary illustrator, saving every penny for art supplies despite his mom's strict, religious household. Norman soaked up every detail around him, expressions, gestures, fleeting moments, and poured them into his sketchbook, a blend of city grit and rural charm that stuck with him for life. At 14, in 1908, he made a bold move, dropping out of high school to join the Chase School of Fine and Applied Art in New York, commuting daily from Mamaroneck. His family scraped by but backed him as best they could. At Chase, he tackled life drawing, including nude models, a shocker for a kid from a rigid home. But he pushed through, driven by determination. In 1910, he switched to the National Academy of Design, then the Art Students League, learning from masters like Thomas Fogarty, who taught him to weave stories through images, and George Bridgman, who drilled precision in human forms. That's when Norman ditched dreams of fine art, realizing his true calling was illustration, crafting stories that hit people in the heart. In 1912, at just 18, he scored his first major gig, thanks to Fogarty, illustrating 12 Tell Me Why stories by Carl Claudy for $150, a life-changing moment, not just for the cash, but for the doors it opened. His work caught the eye of Edward Cave, who was building Boy's Life magazine. Norman walked in hopeful, and Cave gave him a shot, starting with camping guide sketches and eventually over 400 illustrations. At 6 feet and a lanky 140 pounds, he was so skinny the Navy later rejected him during World War I for being underweight. But in 1912, that didn't matter. His journey was off and running. By 1913, at 19, he was Boy's Life's full-time art editor, a rare feat for someone so young, churning out hundreds of images that defined the Boy Scouts for America, with flawless uniforms, vivid expressions, and epic adventures. His art was so popular that by 1929, the Boy Scout calendar was the nation's top seller. Success didn't go to his head. It made him cautious, aware of how fast it could all vanish. So he doubled down on hard work. In 1914, he bonded with artist Clyde Forsyth at Boys Life, renting a barn once owned by Western art icon Frederick Remington, a space that felt holy. Forsyth urged him to aim higher, pushing him to submit to the Saturday Evening Post. They worked side by side, fueling each other's fire, helping Norman grow in skill and confidence. No longer just a scout illustrator, but a rising star. By 1915, at 20, he convinced his family to move to New Rochelle, a hub for top illustrators like Joseph Landecker, his idol. The risky move paid off, plunging him into a creative hotspot near New York's publishing world, where he made friends, found mentors, and opened new doors. Then came 1916, a game changer at 22, when his first Saturday Evening Post cover hit stands in May, like a bolt of lightning. By January 1917, he'd done 6 covers, grabbing attention nationwide. Life magazine hyped the Post as America's greatest showcase, with Norman's work front and center. But fame hit hard and fast. By 25, he was burned out, quitting Boys Life to focus on the Post, where he'd already cranked out 25 covers and countless illustrations. Beneath the glossy success, doubt gnawed at him. Since 1911, he'd felt insecure about his looks, his name, his place in the world, once saying, "All I had was drawing, and that didn't seem like much." Instead of folding, he channeled those feelings into art, painting the awkward, the nervous, the ignored, making millions of Americans feel seen. That summer, he married Irene O'Connor, a teacher 3 years older, right after his first Post cover. They barely knew each other, proposing at a New Rochelle boarding house, but the marriage felt off from the start. Irene craved a normal home. Norman was consumed by his art, vanishing into his work and neglecting her. They never had kids, and years later, he admitted a gut-punch truth. "After a while, I realized she didn't love me." The marriage limped on for 14 years until 1929, post-stock market crash, when they took separate vacations, and Irene filed for divorce in Reno. As his personal life crumbled, Norman's fame soared. From 1916 to 1919, his 25 Post covers, many tied to World War I, like one of a boy wondering if a short man could be a soldier, were everywhere. Life used him in ads to boost subscriptions, but at 22, the pressure overwhelmed him, sparking anxiety and fear of being forgotten. His friend Forsyth noticed him disappearing at times, haunted by those fears. By 1920, his art evolved, smoother, less cartoony, earning praise from serious artists, thanks to Bridgman's guidance. But the stress didn't let up, and he suffered a quiet, nervous breakdown, stepping away to recover. During this, he grew close to illustrator J.C. Landecker, a hero who helped him through. Still in his mid-20s, he was already America's top magazine illustrator, a heavy crown to wear. In the 1920s, brands like Jell-O came calling, and in 1923, he painted a cheery family for their ad, cementing his warm, nostalgic style. He worked for Literary Digest, Country Gentleman, Leslie's Weekly, Judge, and Life, with ads paying well and letting him experiment, though the pressure never faded. In 1929, at Louisville Landing, he and Irene split for summer trips, Norman to Europe's museums in France, Austria, and Spain. Back home, Irene confessed she loved someone else, filing for divorce on January 13, 1930. Though he flirted himself, the news stung. He fled to Alhambra, California, staying with Forsyth, where he painted the doctor and the doll. There, Forsyth introduced him to Mary Barstow, a math teacher and writer 14 years younger. They married April 17, 1930, in her parents' garden, soon welcoming sons Jarvis, Thomas, and Peter. But by 1933, Norman's mental health tanked again, landing him in a hospital for nervous exhaustion. Millions saw his work weekly, unaware of his inner pain. That year, he took Mary and 5-month-old Jarvis to Europe, studying Rembrandt in Paris. But instead of inspiration, he sank into depression, calling himself a fraud and comparing his post covers to the old masters, even contemplating suicide. The trip scarred him. In 1935, he was tapped to illustrate Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Reluctant at first, he agreed, visiting Hannibal, Missouri, for reference photos, a rare move for serious artists. The illustrations, out in 1936 and 1940, later haunted him for subtle racial stereotypes, a regret he voiced as the civil rights movement grew. In 1938, he and Mary bought a 60-acre Vermont farmhouse, chasing a serene family life. They joined square dances and town meetings, but Mary's drinking worsened, turning her distant and angry, as Norman noted in his journal. He couldn't enjoy simple pleasures like river swims, claiming the water was too cold, though anxiety was the real culprit. In 1939, he started therapy with Erik Erikson, a renowned psychoanalyst who fled Nazi Germany. Erikson helped him see his cheerful paintings as a balm for a lonely childhood under a cold mother, giving his art deeper purpose. In 1942, inspired by Roosevelt's speech, he pitched 4 paintings, Freedom of Speech, Worship, Want, and Fear, to the Post, who hesitated, fearing reader backlash. Norman funded them himself, using Vermont neighbors as models. In 1943, the 4 Freedoms toured 16 cities, raising $132 million in war bonds, over $2 billion today, with 1.2 million viewers. He signed prints, but the freedom of worship, showing diverse races and faiths together, drew hate mail accusing him of pushing racial mixing and communism. Southern cities banned the posters, yet the tour was a triumph. That same year, tragedy struck. His studio burned down, destroying hundreds of paintings, props, and personal items worth $100,000, about $1.5 million now. Some blamed pipe ashes. Norman suspected arson from a neighbor dispute over property lines, though nothing was proven. The loss gutted him, but townsfolk gifted him new pipes in support. Also in 1943, he painted Rosie the Riveter for the Post, a bold woman crushing Hitler's book, based on 19-year-old Mary Louise Doyle, but exaggerated in size, a choice he later regretted. The iconic image enraged male readers, who canceled subscriptions, upset by a woman in a man's job. Yet Norman helped redefine American heroism. Meanwhile, his marriage unraveled as Mary's alcoholism worsened through the 1940s and 1950s, requiring stays at the Austin Riggs Center, 90 minutes from their Vermont home, including electroshock therapy in 1952. Norman felt alone, finding solace in the women he painted, forming quiet bonds. In 1953, they moved to Stockbridge, Massachusetts, for Mary's treatment, and Norman started therapy too, grappling with fame, pressure, and home life. In 1946, his autobiography, My Adventures as an Illustrator, shared his insecurities and perfectionism but skipped darker truths, like suspected amphetamine used to keep up with grueling deadlines. While his art screamed joy, his life was pain, Mary's illness, medical bills, and a home far from the idyllic Stockbridge. In 1953, his son Peter publicly called him distant and work-obsessed, sparking scandal, though later letters showed Norman tried, funding his son's art and building Jarvis's studio. His perfectionism cost family time. One cover took nearly a year, forcing him to borrow money to stay afloat. Mary's sudden death in 1959 from a heart attack crushed him. His grief seeped into darker paintings, rejected by magazines craving joy. Erikson told him, "You paint happiness, but don't live it," a sting he buried to keep working. In 1961, at 67, he married Molly Punderson, a 65-year-old retired teacher, for her organization, Not Romance, bringing stability after years of chaos. In 1963, After 47 years and 321 covers, he left the Post, his last depicting JFK post-assassination. Tired of painting only white, happy families, Black Americans were relegated to background roles. He joined Look magazine in 1964, gaining freedom to tackle civil rights and injustice. His first Look piece, The Problem We All Live With, showed 6-year-old Ruby Bridges escorted by marshals past a wall with slurs and a splattered tomato. It shocked readers, sparking thousands of subscription cancellations and hate letters calling him a race traitor, some threatening his life. At 70, he pressed on. Later that year, the murder of civil rights workers James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner in Mississippi kept him awake. Fueling Murder in Mississippi, a haunting depiction of their final moments under torchlight, consuming him for 5 weeks. In 1967, New Kids in the Neighborhood captured Black and white kids meeting in a desegregated area, quiet but emotional, showing his fight at 73. He worked to atone for past stereotypical portrayals, consulting activists to ensure respectful, heroic depictions of Black Americans. In 1978, 7 of his paintings, including 1919's Taking a Break, were stolen from a Minnesota gallery, the state's biggest art heist. Taking a Break resurfaced in 2017 in New Jersey, bought cheap after pool game damage. In 2013, biographer Deborah Solomon claimed Rockwell hid erotic sketches and repressed desires, citing diary notes about a young assistant. Some experts agreed. His granddaughter called it unfair, leaving his private life a mystery. On January 10, 1977, President Ford awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but at 83, too ill to attend, Jarvis accepted for him. Privately, Norman felt he'd sold out, trading deeper art for commercial success, wondering if he missed his true path. He died November 8, 1978, at 84, leaving $50,000 in unpaid therapy bills, about $200,000 today, revealing a lifetime battling anxiety and depression behind his joyful art. In 2004, his iconic Breaking Home Ties was found behind a fake wall in illustrator Don Track's home, hidden during a divorce, selling for $15.4 million in 2006. The find sparked questions. How many more Rockwell originals are tucked away, waiting to be uncovered?